Look at the person who is dominating your office. They are immaculate. Their desk is organized with mathematical precision. Their emails are bulletproof and their smile never fades. They are the epitome of high-functioning human machinery, but follow them home. The moment the front door clicks shut, the machinery shatters. The tailored jacket is thrown onto a floor that has not been vacuumed in weeks. The laptop is abandoned for a glowing screen of infinite scrolling. The kitchen sink is a monument of rotting dishes. This is not a hypocrite, and this is not a lazy person. This is a biological system running on empty. You are watching a psychological phenomenon where absolute order demands absolute chaos. Welcome to the shadow side of excellence. 1. Ego depletion. The mortgage willpower. We are raised on a cultural myth. We are told that willpower is a muscle that grows stronger with use, or a moral compass that defines our character. If you are disciplined at work, you should be disciplined at home. If you can manage a multi-million-dollar budget at 3 in the afternoon, you should be able to manage a laundry basket at 8 in the evening. But cognitive science reveals a much darker truth. Willpower is not a moral trait. It is a finite, quantifiable, biological currency. Every single decision you make, every impulse you suppress, and every polite nod you give to an annoying coworker is not free. You are paying for it with a resource known in behavioral psychology as executive function. In the late 1990s, social psychologist Roy Baumeister conducted a foundational experiment that would fundamentally change our understanding of human discipline. He brought hungry participants into a room filled with the aroma of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies. On the table sat 2 bowls, one filled with the warm, delicious cookies and rich chocolates, and the other filled with cold, bitter radishes. Baumeister divided the participants into 2 groups. The first group was told they could eat as many cookies as they wanted. The second group was given the brutal task of resisting the cookies and eating only the radishes. Forcing a starving human mind to stare at chocolate while chewing on a radish requires an immense amount of self-control. After this temptation phase, both groups were taken to a different room and given an entirely unrelated task, solving geometric puzzles. Unbeknownst to the participants, these puzzles were mathematically impossible to solve. The researchers were not measuring intelligence, they were measuring persistence. They wanted to see how long someone would try before giving up. The results were stark and undeniable. The group that ate the cookies worked on the impossible puzzles for an average of 20 minutes before quitting. But the radish group, the individuals who had spent the last half hour forcing themselves to suppress their desires and maintain composure, gave up after just 8 minutes. They quit more than twice as fast. This experiment proved the existence of ego depletion. Self-control is a single centralized fuel tank. When you use it to suppress an impulse, you drain the tank. When the tank is empty, your capacity to regulate your own behavior completely collapses. Now, look at the modern corporate warrior through the lens of the radish experiment. The office environment is a modern gauntlet of psychological radish chewing. From 9 to 5, you are constantly draining your fuel tank. You want to scream at your manager, but you smile and say thank you. You want to put your head on your desk and sleep, but you force your eyes open and type another spreadsheet. You want to check your phone, but you stare at the presentation. By the time you leave the office, your cognitive bank account is completely overdrawn. Your brain is in a state of severe biological bankruptcy. When you cross the threshold of your apartment, your brain looks at a pile of dirty dishes or a vacuum cleaner, and it treats that task the same way the exhausted participants treated the impossible puzzles. It simply quits. The mess around you is not a reflection of your character. It is the physical receipt of the mental energy you sold to your employer during the day. 2. The social mask and the safe sanctuary of deconstruction. To survive in modern society, we must become actors. Carl Jung, one of the founding fathers of analytical psychology, called this the persona. The word persona is derived from the Latin word for a theatrical mask worn by actors in antiquity. Jung argued that the persona is a complicated system of relations between the individual consciousness and society. It is a compromise between what a person truly is and what the community expects them to be. The persona is highly functional. It protects you. It allows you to navigate the complex social hierarchies of the workplace. The workplace persona is polished, articulate, patient, and emotionally regulated. It is a version of you that has been heavily filtered through the expectations of capitalism. But maintaining a mask is an unnatural act. Biologically, your brain wants to seek comfort, conserve energy, and express raw emotion. Forcing your body into a suit, forcing your voice into a corporate cadence, and forcing your face into a mask of perpetual approachability requires a continuous expenditure of neurological energy. The prefrontal cortex must actively suppress your natural animalistic urges to rest and withdraw. When you wear a mask for 8, 10, or 12 hours a day, the psychological pressure builds up. In public, you are performing. And the danger of a continuous performance is the total loss of the true self. If you never take the mask off, your psyche begins to fracture. This brings us to the concept of the safe sanctuary. The home is not merely a physical structure of wood and concrete. In the architecture of the human mind, the home functions as the anti-office. It is the only space on earth where the social contract is temporarily suspended. It is the only place where there is no audience, no performance review, and no supervisor judging your posture. When the high-performing professional enters their home and drops their keys, a profound psychological shift occurs. It is an act of radical deconstruction. The ego, which has been stretched to its absolute limit all day, snaps back like a rubber band. The brain recognizes that it has entered a zone of zero social consequence. In this zone, the messy room, the unmade bed, and the clothes scattered across the floor are not accidents. They are an active defensive rebellion against the oppressive order of the outside world. The brain looks at the chaos of the home and finds a strange, twisted comfort in it. Why? Because chaos requires absolutely no energy to maintain. Order requires energy. Cleanliness requires vigilance. Perfection requires work. When you allow your home to become messy, you are letting the physical world match your internal mental state. You are tired, unstructured, and fragmented, so your environment becomes tired, unstructured, and fragmented. For the exhausted individual, a perfectly clean, sterile apartment at night feels like an extension of the office. It feels like another standard they have to maintain, another test they have to pass. Therefore, leaning into the laziness and the messiness is an instinctive mechanism of self-preservation. It is the mind saying, I have run out of the currency required to maintain the illusion of perfection. Here in this dark, unkempt room, I am allowed to be broken. I am allowed to be lazy. I am allowed to be human. 3. Revenge bedtime procrastination. The stolen hours of the night. When the sun sets, a silent war begins inside the mind of the exhausted high performer. You know you should sleep. Your eyes are heavy, your body aches, and your alarm is set for 6 in the morning. Yet you stay awake. You sit in the dark, bathed in the blue light of your smartphone, scrolling through meaningless videos, reading random articles, or watching television shows you do not even care about. In modern behavioral science, this self-destructive loop is known as revenge bedtime procrastination. The key word here is revenge. But who are you taking revenge against? You are taking revenge against your own schedule. You are taking revenge against a life that demands you give your best hours to someone else. When a person spends their entire day in a state of high compliance, answering to managers, meeting deadlines, and putting their own desires aside for corporate goals, they experience a total loss of autonomy. From 9 to 5, your time is not your own. You are a cog in a machine, moving according to an external script. When you return home, your subconscious mind experiences an intense craving for control. It realizes that the only time you truly belong to yourself is when everyone else is asleep. The night is a blank canvas. It is the only space where no one can ask you for a status report, no one can send you an urgent email, and no one can judge your productivity. This psychological dynamic was perfectly illustrated in a famous longitudinal study conducted by structural anthropologists and psychologists at UCLA, known as the Center on Everyday Lives of Families. Researchers spent years tracking the daily routines of dual-income, high-stress working families. They installed cameras in homes and tracked biometric stress data. The researchers discovered a fascinating systemic pattern. For these exhausted professionals, the late-night hours were treated as a sacred, non-negotiable ritual of non-productivity. Even when individuals showed physiological signs of extreme sleep deprivation, they actively resisted going to bed. The study concluded that these individuals were using the night as a desperate psychological compensation tool. They were willingly trading their physical health tomorrow for a sense of personal freedom tonight. If you sleep at 10 in the evening, your day consists entirely of working, commuting, and preparing for work. Your life becomes a closed loop of labor. By pushing your bedtime to 1 or 2 in the morning, you create an artificial pocket of time that belongs exclusively to you. The tragedy of the high performer is that this act of rebellion is deeply counterproductive. To gain a brief illusion of freedom, you mortgage your neurological recovery. You wake up the next morning with less dopamine, less patience, and an even lower capacity for self-control, ensuring that your next day at the office will drain your fuel tank even faster. You are burning your own house down just to feel the warmth of the fire. 4. Cognitive hyperselection and the death of social energy. There is a common misconception that introverts lack social skills and extroverts possess them. But advanced social psychology views socialization not as a personality trait, but as a high-octane cognitive process. To have a conversation requires your brain to perform hundreds of calculations per second. You must read micro-expressions, interpret vocal tones, filter out background noise, formulate appropriate responses, and suppress inappropriate thoughts. During an intense workday, an office worker engages in what is called cognitive hyperselection. You are forced to interact with people you did not choose to be around. You must navigate corporate politics, diffuse passive-aggressive emails, and maintain a state of professional friendliness. This constant social calibration causes severe neural fatigue in the mirror neuron system in the temporal lobes. When the workday ends, the social battery is not just low, it is corroded. This leads to a state of profound emotional numbness and a total withdrawal from human contact, a phenomenon known in clinical psychology as the isolation reflex. Consider the historical case of Nikola Tesla, one of the most brilliant and hyper-focused minds in human history. While working in his laboratories in New York, Tesla was capable of interacting with wealthy investors, elite politicians, and fellow scientists with immense charm and sophistication. He could command a room and articulate complex scientific principles to laymen perfectly. But the moment he left the public eye and returned to his private quarters, Tesla retreated into absolute, impenetrable isolation. He would refuse to see visitors for weeks. He lived in hotel rooms where he demanded that no one touch him, and he communicated with staff primarily through written notes left outside his door. Tesla was not crazy. He was managing an overstimulated, exhausted nervous system. He understood intuitively that his public genius required absolute private emptiness. The modern high performer experiences a micro version of Tesla's isolation every single day. When you get home and your phone buzzes with a text message from a close friend or a family member, your brain does not see an opportunity for connection. It sees a threat. It sees another demand for energy. It looks at the notification and thinks, I cannot perform for you right now. This creates a painful cycle of guilt. You love your friends, you care about your family, but the thought of opening a chat app and typing a thoughtful response feels as exhausting as climbing a mountain. So you ignore the message, you let the notifications pile up. Your social energy becomes highly defensive and protective. You ration your words like water in a desert. The person who was laughing loudly in the conference room at 2 in the afternoon becomes a silent ghost at 8 in the evening, staring blankly at a wall, unable to offer a single sentence to the people who matter most. 5. Spatial dissonance and the dual identity crisis. The final and most visible symptom of this psychological split is spatial dissonance, the striking, almost shocking contrast between the environments an individual populates. It is the architectural manifestation of a fractured mind. In environmental psychology, our surroundings are not passive backdrops. They are an externalized map of our cognitive state. A clean, organized office cubicle reflects a mind that is actively suppressing internal chaos to meet an external standard. But a chaotic, unkempt home reflects a mind that has completely abandoned external standards to cope with internal exhaustion. This dual identity crisis can be analyzed through a profound sociological theory known as the broken windows theory, first introduced by social scientists James Q. Wilson and George L. Kelling. The theory states that if a building has one broken window that is left unrepaired, the tendency is for vandals to break a few more windows. Eventually, they may even break into the building, and if it's unoccupied, perhaps light fires inside. In short, visible signs of disorder create an environment that encourages further disorder and neglect. In the context of the individual psyche, your office space is heavily protected by social surveillance. The fear of being judged by peers or reprimanded by superiors keeps your windows perfectly intact. Every folder is labeled, every pen is in its place, and the desk is wiped clean. You are maintaining a facade of absolute control because the environment demands it. But when you cross the threshold of your home, the social surveillance vanishes. The first window breaks. Perhaps you drop your dirty socks on the floor instead of placing them in the hamper. Because your willpower is depleted, you do not repair this window. Your brain applies a primitive form of logic. Since the floor is already messy, it does not matter if I leave this coffee mug on the coffee table. It does not matter if I leave the bed unmade. Within days, a chain reaction of cognitive neglect takes over. The small localized mess transforms into a systemic environment of disarray. This is not because you love filth. It is because your brain has established a strict psychological boundary. It has designated the office as the zone of artificial perfection and the home as the zone of raw reality. The danger of this spatial dissonance is that it eventually feeds back into your psychology. Sleeping in an unkempt room and waking up surrounded by chaos increases your morning cortisol levels. Your brain registers the visual clutter as a long list of unfinished tasks, triggering subconscious stress before you even brush your teeth. You find yourself trapped in a vicious, self-perpetuating loop. You work hard to escape the stress of your life. You return home too exhausted to maintain your environment, and the chaotic environment drains the remaining energy you need to recover for the next day. You become a stranger in your own house, living a double life as a pristine corporate asset by day and a hostage to your own exhaustion by night. If you recognize yourself in this paradox, understand this. Your messy room and your late-night scrolling are not character flaws. They are defensive survival mechanisms of an over-engineered mind trying to protect itself from total burnout. But survival is not the same as living. You cannot heal your exhaustion by letting your sanctuary decay, nor can you find freedom by stealing hours from your sleep. The solution is not to force more discipline onto your nights. It is to reduce the performance of your days. Stop spending every single drop of your psychological currency at the office. Save 10% of your mental energy for the person you are when the mask comes off. Lower your standards of public perfection so you can raise your standards of private peace. Your home should not be a monument to your exhaustion. It should be the place where you finally return to yourself. Look around your room right now. What is the one small piece of chaos you have been ignoring because you were too tired to care? Pick it up, clean it up. Not for the world, not for an audience, but as a statement to your subconscious mind that you are finally taking control of your sanctuary. Tell me in the comments below, which room in your house takes the hardest hit when you are burnt out from work? Let us unmask the shadow side of excellence together.